What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Kuya P. Nerds rule the world, back for another ShoPowSho. So it's the Adobro, the Babinka boy, the leader of the Holla Holla homies in the Center Gang. Back again with my Kuya HP Mendoza returning. We recently had him on talking about The Secret Art of Human Flight, his latest film project. Please go check it out. I'll have links in the description below. Go show love to my brother. He put a lot of work on this film, and I had a great conversation. So also go check out that ShoPowSho episode on that. But this time around, HP and I are going to get to know a lot about each other, and we're definitely going to learn a lot more about him. Kuya HP, thank you for coming through. How are you today, man?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, dude. You inspire me through your work, and then through our conversations, man. I'm like, I got a cat that if we were closer together, I'm sure we'd be like the best of friends, because you're just a good dude, man, and I appreciate you.
Likewise, man. And you know what? Like, it's just a difference of about a few thousand miles. That's all.
Yeah. The more we travel, I plan to go out there more. And if you ever come out this way, we gotta hang and have some food, man. You know.
I will be out that way more often. So you got to come out here before I get out there.
Okay. All right, bro.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to talk offline because we don't want the crazy people to like get down. But okay, if you're coming out this way,
Yeah, no, I see you guys. I see you all.
All right, well, let's do what we do, man. Let me do my Filipino Oprah. As I told you earlier, if you've all seen other ShoPow shows, we're going to have fun. We're going to learn about the brilliance that is HP Mendoza. So how I kick it off, HP, is before we celebrate you, we celebrate those that came before, because that's what we do as Filipinos, man. A lot of it is in the DNA. It's in our soul. It's in our bloodline. Were there any artists... any previous filmmakers in the bloodline? Tell me about your parents or just anybody in the past that, you know, maybe that some of that creativity that you now have came through the blood. Can you tell me about your family, parents, anything? Let's start off there. I know it's a lot.
No, it's I mean, dude, everything's a lot these days. And
I'm like, creatives. There's so many stories we draw from.
Right. And I'm just like down to talk about it all. But I think one thing that I think might resonate with you because you're a creative, you're a Filipino American creative, is that, and we're about the same age, right? Like we're the same generation. Specifically, my parents came here in the 60s, you know, and it was all about, you know, kind of like the assimilation during the summer of love. Like my mom started getting to know a lot of Hell's Angels, and like my dad knew a lot of hippies. And so my dad played guitar, and I come from a family of politics and medicine. Typical, right? like lots of nurses. But what's funny is if I think about the inspiration for a lot of what I did, it's just I think my family trying to find distraction for me, right? Like I was 5 years old and my father came home with a Super 8 camera, you know? And I was like, oh, what is it? Like, can you do videos with that? And he was like, not videos, anak, film. And I was like, oh, wow. So like 3-minute cartridges, you know, you can only shoot 3 minutes at a time. Then you had to get that developed. I was 5, you know, and I wasn't necessarily making movies yet. I think what happened was I had just done. You ever been to Back to the Future, the ride at Universal Studios?
Yeah.
Like a simulator. I was trying to make my own simulator, so I had like those Hot Wheels tracks, you know, and I would take the camera and I would like go down this way, like, you know, and like fly around the house, get that developed and project it, put my family on the couch and move the couch like they were in a ride. So I wasn't like filmmaking. I was just kind of like, what can I do with this camera? And I think honestly, then like my older brother Joe, like it was like he got me into gaming. So what's funny about that, right, is like I got into the storytelling of like Legend of Zelda. I got into the storytelling of like Ultima. He brought the Commodore 64 home. All this stuff that came from my father and my brother. They over the years just lost complete interest because they were just going through all these interests, like of just trying to think of things to, you know, give to the kid in the house, like to keep them occupied, you know. Because you know we grew up in the mission, and like the main thing that people knew was you keep your kids occupied, or otherwise they might fall into with a bad group, right? Um, and yeah, so like yeah, we did watch movies growing up. We did, of course, right? But it wasn't the movie watching with them that made me want to be a filmmaker. Interestingly, it had to do with a lot of like the music that was shared. My father's mother was a piano teacher, And what did I do? Went to her piano, played Legend of Zelda on that. So I'm bringing gaming into the music, and I'm talking about the story of Link trying to save Zelda, and that becomes a movie in my head that I'm trying to put in the camera that I got from my father at 5 years old. So it all ended up becoming about movies, but it didn't start that way. It was just all these influences from my family that all had to do with storytelling. And I know that's a buzzword, but like I do think that everybody in my family, everybody, they're all really good storytellers, regardless of what the medium is. And I just kind of, it's synthesis, man. I just took it all from my family members and it all became like what I am today.
Wow. Awesome. Okay. We went a little bit into where I'm going to go, but that's fine. And I love this. So shout out to the bloodline, shout out to the family. So let's start from 1 to 5. And we already started, like I said, into with they came over from the Philippines, Bay Area, politicians, pharmacists. What would they tell me about HP Mendoza, ages 1 through 5? What you're into, what kind of a kid you were, and life in general at that time growing up. So Bay Area is where you're
Bay
at?
Area. The Mission, Mission
Okay.
Excelsior District in San Francisco. Because my family came here, I think 68. Had to have been. Sorry, parents, if I'm getting the exact year wrong. But yeah, so what's interesting is I have 2 older brothers, and they were both born in the Philippines, but they came here when they were really small. They were they were like babies.
So you were born
So
here.
I was born in San Francisco. Yeah.
Okay.
And what's funny is I was the sensitive one, like allergies. Like he had an inhaler, was like couldn't eat anything,
Yeah.
And with that, like kind of came a bunch of other things that I think they equated with American born. If that makes any sense, because like, man, it sucked not being able to eat any seafood or any nuts growing up. And they were like, oh, typical, that's so American. I'm like, I want to eat that. I'm just allergic, But a lot of that just kind of like bled into how I was seen. And I think for a long time, I bristled at the idea of being sensitive, because I'm just, especially being the youngest of 3 boys, I'm like, no, I'm not sensitive. I'm a man, like
Yeah.
I didn't want to be seen, especially knowing deep down inside, I'm like, ooh, I know I'm gay, but
Yeah.
I don't want my super like, tough Catholic family to know that. So many things led to me just like kind of like faking it till I made it. If that makes any sense.
Oh
And
yeah,
so a
totally.
lot of that had,
Yeah.
a lot of that had
Male
a lot of that
society at that
also,
time dominating the push us as males that you have
yeah.
to like girls and you can't like boys, all of that kind of bullshit.
Or
Yeah.
even simpler than orientation, you can't feel, right? And like,
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, would you feel something? What are you gay? You know, what are you, a
Exactly.
woman?
Yeah.
And it's funny because then that a lot of that kind of fed into this need for me to be the first person in the family to like graduate from an American institution, right? So like they were all about like getting me to skip a grade and like, they saw me as I don't know what they saw me as. I guess they saw me as some kind of prodigy only because I was the one who was born here, like I was born here and like I spoke English and, oh, wow, so intelligent. Listen to his English. I'm like, yeah, but I just sound like every other Filipino American that I'm going to school with. You guys just think I'm a genius because I'm speaking English. And it became all about like academia. It became about being an academic and like, why are you so bad at math? You know, I'm not a math Asian. I'm not like
Well,
I love
same.
having,
I'm
you
not the
know,
engineering Asian. I'm the creative
you know,
Asian. Like, no.
did you grow up with this? This cracks me up. So I love how I actually snapped at my 3rd grade teacher. I was just like, who needs this? I don't need to learn all this. I'll have a calculator with me. And I've always said that growing up. I'm like, I don't need to learn this. I'll just check a calculator. And my teachers would always say, oh yeah, what are you gonna carry a calculator in your pocket with you? Guess what? The last time I actually like had to like recite a theorem from memory, not a math Asian. Glad for the phone. Anyway, so what's funny is like during all this like academia, they put me in spelling bees, like I was that kid, you know? And what's really funny about it is if I play their voices in my head, I have this idea that they always think of me like they think that my core being is this like genius academic intellectual when if I really look at what happened on paper, they put me in a spelling bee, came in second place, they skipped me a grade from first to third, and I got like D's and F's for like years to come,
They
right?
rushed
And
you.
yeah, and here's
And
the
they were doing
thing.
it for them, not for you. You didn't want to do that, right? I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn,
No,
but
no, no,
I
no,
feel this because
I didn't
they,
want to do it.
oh, because my son, this, my, it's that whole Jones in mentality amongst us Filipinos. Let's be real, in our community, like,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, man, I used to hear the moms comparing their kids to each other all the time. And so the thing is, I think I would hear kids of any ethnicity and their parents going through that, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But there was an added weight when my mom and dad would talk about it because their whole thing is like, we came to America to give you a better, a better life, and you come back with this, and they hold like my test scores, which has like a C, and I won't say DF, I'm exaggerating. I was like a C D student. Basically, I was a little bit lower than average for all the years to come. You know why? Because I made best friends in first grade. You skip that grade, and suddenly you're 1 year younger than everybody. Everyone looks at you like you're a freak. And at that point, everybody was 9, I was 8. I started adding 1 year to my age for the rest of my life. I didn't stop lying about my age until I was 25. Like I would literally
oh
like it does
wow,
something to you. It does something to you, because it was this thing where I'm like, I lost all my friends because all the first graders who went to second grade, they would look at me like, oh, you think you're better than us? You went to third grade. And all the third graders would look at me and say like, wow, who's the small kid? He should be in second grade. So I was from that point on a loner, getting C's and D's, not a math Asian, and lying about his age, right? And so what do? You escape. You
yes,
fucking escape, man. You watch all the Spielberg films. You you wish you could fly with ET. You do think you're Ariel and you wish you could be part of your world. You do all those things and you immerse yourself in, you play the games, you go to a different world, you go to Hyrule, you know? You
mm-hmm.
get lost in all these cinematic universes and you think one day I'll make my own.
Mm.
Um
Mm.
and yeah,
That's so real.
and here's the thing, I do think that all the people who there, I think when I talk to other filmmakers and storytellers, they kind of relate, right? But I think whenever I talk to like another queer filmmaker or another Filipino filmmaker, or especially another queer Filipino filmmaker, like they know like almost every beat of my story. Because there's something very specific about being this generation of kids of immigrants who came here for a better life. And there's no way in hell they would have ever envisioned that their kid was gonna want to get into the arts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's hard to when even to this day people like me and people like myself my age still have a hard time convincing their Filipino ass family that this is worthwhile, because there's that saying that I love. It's a messed up joke, but I love this joke, which is, sell a man a movie ticket and he'll be broke for a day, but teach a man how to make a movie, he'll be broke for a lifetime. And that's like my family's mantra. Like they're just like, is he okay? Yeah, it's the fifth movie he's directed, but yeah, but he's still broke. It's okay. You know?
Bro, real talk. They love for us to play with it, but it's not a full-time gig to them. It's not a real job. It's not a real job.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Like also, I love when, anyone who supports you will be like, yeah, I haven't seen you in a while. What's your last movie or what's your newest movie, right? But like families like this, oh yeah, you still making movies? Like the still, like it's a very specific pivot in the language, You still making movies? You're not good, because now we can talk about nursing or whatever, we can talk about politics.
Bro, the pain. We feel this. It's so okay. All right, we 1 to 5. We talk 1 to 5, and we're going all, which I love it. So basically, I wanted to cover like what would they tell me about you, and then before we get into like school, and then when we choose, because there's all these little life moments within all those beats, right? So
Yeah.
they would tell me they gave you a camera, and you're just the quiet shy kid, and you started lying about your age. I'm kind of just trying to intersect what you told me already,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
In all that. So quiet kid. Let's start. We get into school. So we're school years, middle school, elementary, that time frame. do you recall what just some of the stuff you started getting into at this time? I think you said 8 is when your dad first gave you like your first camera.
Oh no, I
Um,
was 5 years old when that happened.
oh wow. Okay, so that was
Yeah,
at the 5 year point, and
yeah.
then
I was 8 years old
started.
when I skipped the grade. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into these school years and just finding out about ourselves, getting training now for the road down the line because then we're gonna get into high school, college, and
Right.
outside of that. But like that professional part of life, of schooling, and then learning about our reality outside of our home, and then I want to get into finding out. Hold on, we know what our in-house situation is. I'm a Filipino now,
Oh, there are
but
layers
also
to
I'm
that
kind of
now.
different. And I think is I don't know. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. Here, where I'm, and the reason I like talking about that part of life is I'm distinctly different because again, where I was at, was like mixed community, or more predominantly white. And why what I was telling you earlier when we were talking like East Coast, West Coast Asians, maybe before we started recording, that I feel there's a lot more community there because I've had other interviews on of a lot of my Bay Area cats. It was straight Filipino. They didn't see other race. So it's, it was a distinct difference when you find out, oh, I'm Filipino and I'm different. I eat different. All of that. Tell
Right.
me your story, HP.
Well, so you know, I do want to say that like a lot of what I went through um isn't that different from all the other Filipinos that I grew up with. So like I'm not trying to be like, oh yeah, look at this hard life that I had. But the great thing about the community you're talking about was having other Filipino Americans that I could complain about this with, right? And I went to Catholic school. Um, because not only did they want me to be raised right, like as an American, they loved the rigidity of the kid in the uniform, right? Like, I mean, literally, be more uniform, blend in, do the thing, do the thing. We came here for a reason. We came here for a reason, and like you can't get that out of your head. We came here for a reason. Especially when you get told all the stories of the poverty that they came from in the Philippines. And I have a big family. Like my grandmother had 11 kids, and they all have kids of their own now. So I have tons of cousins, and we talk about this a lot. We talk about how, you know, sometimes you don't want to be excellent. Sometimes you just want to exist, you know?
Yes.
And man, just trying to exist in a Catholic school while knowing you're gay was really tough, right? Because like not only did I have a lot to live up to with, my immigrant family who, for all intents and purposes was excelling in the Philippines, but came here for a better life, right? And here I am feeling like I'm a slacker because all I want is to exist. But of course, in hindsight, of course, like, well, dude, you're 8, of course. Like you don't have career ambitions when you're 8. You want to be left alone, not left alone, but you just want to exist, right? And there now I do think that my existence is resistance, but I'm gonna save that for another topic. I think when I was in Catholic school, I was devout. You had to be, because we went to mass every day except for Saturday, right? We and after every mass we had religion class. So I studied the Bible. I was a Bible kid. We were all Bible kids. And I think what happened was everything started to change when my parents separated. My parents started talking about divorcing. And this is where I want to give credit where credit's due, because I don't want to give off the impression that I'm ingrateful, right? Because of course I'm grateful for the life that my parents and my family gave me, in the face of adversity, in the face of hardship. Like my grandparents were seeing guerrilla warfare in the Philippines during their time and World War II, like just like stuff even interpersonally between like barrios, right? Like learning that my family had to learn how to throw grenades. Like I didn't grow up like that,
Wow.
so I recognize how much better my life is, or would have how much worse my life would have been had I stayed, right? Um, and worse even, like I hate even saying that because I'm not passing judgment. I'm kind of only using their words, right? Like they really
Yeah.
wanted to impress
Yeah.
upon me that they brought me here for a quote unquote better life. But um that comes with weight. And this is the thing that I think is so I guess almost just Asian too, right? Like I hear this from a lot of my Chinese American friends too. You know, I mean, hell, like you look at the character of Waverly from the Joy Luck Club, right? Like
Mhm.
it's a lot of this has to do with you know, wanting the best for your kids and not knowing how to do it with sensitivity,
Ooh,
right?
yes.
And because the language is different. And I'm not talking about like just like English versus Tagalog versus Ilocano. I'm not, I'm talking about like cultural language. Like what is your love language, you know? Like I'll never forget I made a joke one time uh what about this book. You know, remember Chicken Soup for the Soul? Like
Yeah.
it was a
Oh
book
yeah.
to sell, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember my mom was like, what's that? And I told her about what the book was about. She goes, what's wrong with chicken soup for the stomach? And I was like, yeah, that's like like that's like the most literal way to put it, right? And I appreciated that because I'm like, I know now that I'm not going to be able to, not now, but this just confirms I'm not going to be able to speak um in abstractions with my family because everything is just kind of handled with irony and like, once you start doing anything sincerely, you're lampooned for it. And
Mm.
what's funny is like when you stifle that, whether it's because of, the dark humor of your family or the toxic masculinity that's inherent in, your bloodline, I guess, whatever. I mean, it's politics too. That's inherent. Um, it doesn't get stifled for very long. It has to come out. It has to manifest in certain ways. So I started writing comics. I started like making comics and plays, and this is in Catholic school, and I think what happened was my oldest brother Jonas was the one who was just like, you guys just let him do his thing. Just let him do his thing. And this is coming from a guy who like went through the ringer too, right? Like he was the first one here to the
Yeah.
United States, and like he being the oldest, you can imagine like the kind of expectations that were put on him, Um, and he kind of told everybody, just let him do his thing. This is what he does. And so I credit him and my family for being like, okay, let's give this a shot. Um, and I don't even know what that looks like, right? Like, 'cause I don't have kids. I don't know what that means to like give someone a shot, but I certainly appreciate it, Like all of a sudden they're like, okay, so what do you want to study? I'm like, I want to watch movies. I want to learn filmmaking. I want to learn more about theater. I want to learn more about games. My brother just like he took me to film festivals. He took me to see foreign films. I didn't know, I didn't know that he was just reading up on this stuff on the fly. I thought, when you're a kid, you're like, wow, he's so smart. I idolize my older brother. I'm like, even to this day, I'm just like, I'm like, man, I just thought he had all that knowledge in his head. Like he took me to my first THX screening. I didn't know what THX was. He taught me about 5.1. He taught me about like how film would like be released in 70 millimeter because of the soundtracks. He took me to see Akira when it first came out, you know? And these are touch points where that all formed like what eventually led to me saying, I think I want to be a filmmaker. And it's so funny because like now, like sometimes like whenever Joe's birthday comes up, I'll get him like something from the past. Like I'm like, yeah, look at this. It's Akira. Remember that? He's like, what's this? I'm like, it's Akira. He's like, oh yeah, cool. I'm like, remember how much we loved it? And I think like in his head, he's just like, yeah, I was just trying to keep you occupied. I'm like, I'm trying to be a good big brother, but his thing was cars, cars and bikes. But he introduced me to like all the gaming systems and all the geekery, you know,
Yeah, that's
and
so dope, bro. I just think that's so beautiful that you were saying like he learned it on the fly to just be an advocate for you and stick up for you as a big brother. And that is
yeah,
just that's touch, bro. Like the empath in me is like, oh my God, that's so very sweet, dude.
oh
That
yeah.
yeah.
No, and by the way, that's not to say that my second oldest brother wasn't like that, but he had his own thing going on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but like, yeah, as far as influences, it's really funny to like start seeing, and again, like I said, 11 uncles and aunts with all of them with their own kids and all the same kind of mindset, um, where like it's like, only the women feel things, right?
Mm.
And when I start expressing these things and I start kind of like dipping my toe in the water. I'm not even dipping my toe in the water by testing to see if I can tell them I'm gay. I'm just dipping my toe in the water to see if I can be sincere. You know what I mean? Like just like talk about things sincerely. And then of course the jokes come and like, I actually do really appreciate the gallows humor of my family, but like it's really interesting how as I got older, and I know I'm skipping ahead, but this is a side note,
All
like
good.
as, as an adult, seeing all the people in my family who used to make fun of feelings are going through all the feels right now. Like they like all of a sudden it's just like, you know, the dam broke and they just have to let it out, you know? whether they're talking about like existential crises or, just feelings of inadequacy being a Filipino person in America, you know, all that stuff, you stifle that, it has to manifest somehow. And I hate to say it, but sometimes if you stifle that long enough, if you're the kind of person that stifle your kid's feelings, you don't know if that kid's going to have those feelings manifest in a way that's going to look like poetry or it's going to look like a way look like beating their wife. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like it's and I've seen it go a number of ways in my family. So I like and I'm going to stop this side note by saying that I'm really glad that now at my big age I actually can talk to my uncles and aunts and like my other like male cousins who I wouldn't expect this from in the Philippines to be literally just talking about their feelings and treating everything like, you know what? It's okay if we have insta therapy. Like you got 5 minutes, I gotta unload on you. You know?
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
That's a new
Oh
thing. It's a new thing for all of
man,
us.
huh?
It's a new thing for all of us, you know?
Yeah. Oh, so real, so real. Um, when when did you find out? This is when another one we always have. Uh, the question is, when did you find out you were Filipino? And because
Oh,
this is traumatic in different respects in different ways, but also um one of I'm curious if the more traumatic thing in dealing with it also when did you find out you were for yourself and you accepted you were gay, and all that, and what hit probably more for you? I feel like with you amongst a lot of my other previous friends and fans and people I've had on, I feel like I don't know where that sits with you in different respects of
it's a
just of
jumble,
what the
man.
vibe and talk conversations we've had, what
Yeah.
probably hits you more.
Yeah, it's a jumble. It changes from day to day. Like I wish I could tell you that I had an exact roadmap of what happened, right? But I don't. Like all I have are my memories, and like those aren't even to be trusted anymore, right? But like if I will say that the one thing that I am happy about is, I mean, my family talked about being Filipino since I was small, you know. They talked about like the plight. They talked about what it meant to come from Pangasinan to San Francisco. They talked about what it was like to petition people one by one from the Philippines over, and they talked about the hardship. So I was super aware of it, right? And and I guess maybe I was lucky in that I grew up with like tons of Filipino kids around me, and we always talked about being Filipino. We would always go to their houses.
So you had pride. I'm sorry, because
Yeah,
there's a lot
yeah.
of self-hate
Well, no,
in
no,
there,
no.
in there
Okay,
as well, right?
I'm gonna walk that back. I kind
Okay.
of spat that out like, yeah, right, because it's Filipino American History Month and I have that right now. But if I were to
Yeah.
really go back, I don't know if I had pride so much as I just had an identity, you know?
Mm.
And it's because hear me out. And this is not a hot take, it's just a take. It's like you can't have pride unless unless you're kind of resisting it against someone who's telling you not to be proud of your identity, right? And I do have pride now, but at the time, I didn't even have people working against me because we were the
Mm.
norm. We had so many Filipinos around us at all times. And it wasn't just like, oh, I had this big Filipino house, and then I would go out into the real world and I would feel like they were looking at me funny. I didn't have that either because everybody was Filipino American. I had like my teachers in this Catholic school were Filipino American, and so it was kind of normalized, right? And and there was a funny thing about like the neighborhood that I grew up in, which is the Mission Excelsior, where I'm back in now, where yeah, there was just like close ties between Filipinos, Latinos, and Black people, like the Black community, then the Filipino community especially. And there was a really funny thing about how I didn't know it was weird that the Black friends that I had growing up were all learning Tagalog. I didn't know that was weird until college, right? It was like for me, just growing up with like so many people of different ethnicities, but they all kind of wanted to be Filipino. I didn't have the oppression that I think I think a lot of other people might have had, even just like 5 minutes north from here. Like it's
Yeah.
very specific to the neighborhood that I grew up in. Um, so when did I find out I was Filipino? And I think what you're asking is when did you find out you were other, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's the revelation, right?
Yeah. And
Um,
that's why I was thinking also being gay also works in that because that's one and the
oh
same.
yeah.
It's wholehearted.
Dude,
Yeah.
dude, I mean, you have no idea. They're inextricable. You know why? Because I did, as I got older, the more I tried to hide being gay, the more I leaned into my Filipino identity. Does that make sense? It's like I
Yeah.
had energy that I had to expend that came from a kind of dysphoria that I was experiencing, that I had to lean into an identity, whether it was my nerd identity, my geek identity, or my Filipino, fine, so be it. At least I have a
Yeah.
community, right? And I did. And and like ignoring the fact that I was gay was just eating me alive. And when I finally came out and I started like introducing myself to the gay community, that was like, like the Castro here in San Francisco. That's the first time I experienced racism. You know, it's
Wow.
like all of a sudden I mean, the Castro, I mean, this is the 90s. It's safe to say about that era that like any gay neighborhood USA was white boy town, you know? And like any group of friends would have like all like the white gays and like the one brown dude or the one black guy, It's like all of a sudden you understand where Power Rangers comes from. You understand like the dynamic of all these sitcoms, right? It's like, oh, it's not just a TV thing. That literally is kind of thing. It's like Highlander. There can only be one. And like I would find myself being the one in a lot of these situations and having and being subject to a lot of the scrutiny of these non-Filipino or non-POCs, right?
Yeah.
And of course, we weren't dumb. We learned about the civil rights movement. We knew everything that led to where we are today, and we recognize that we are the benefactors of all the people who have fought for us, all the people, all the activists that led the way. Larry Itliong, the Manongs, all the Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. We learned all that, but it didn't feel like it really pertained to me until I heard the first racist epithet thrown at me, and it wasn't until I came out of the closet. Isn't that interesting?
Mm.
So to
Yeah.
your point, yeah,
Yeah.
it is one and the same. It's all there. Because what's happening with me at this point is, and I'd like to think this happens to everybody, is with every year that passes in your life, you're just learning how to be yourself. You're just learning how to be more authentic. You're learning how to shut out the voices that tell you not to be you because we're surrounded by them. Whether they be images on TV, newscasters who are feeding you media about bad POCs, or sinning homosexuals, whatever. Like we are constantly surrounded by voices telling us to not be ourselves. And the older you get, the more comfortable you get with being yourself, the more you realize, okay, no, I'm other and that's okay. I just have to navigate this. And I think that's what I love so much about finding multiple communities, like and seeing the Venn diagram that comes from that. Like I have like my queer circle and then my Filipino circle, and then like larger than that's like the Asian American circle, and larger than the queer circle is my San Francisco circle, and then like and right in the middle is me, right? Like me and a handful of other people, right? That are my close friends. And that's what community is for me. My community is about community. I think for me, I'm not saying I'm not defining this. Okay, I'm not a dictionary, but for me, community is not about seeking your family, right? It's not about seeking the people you're going to keep close to you. For me, it's about finding the people who've been at your side the whole time,
Mm.
and that's community.
Love that. Yeah. Woo. Oh man, I love these conversations, man, because yeah,
I'm
it's
glad. I think I'm rambling,
finding
man.
community and finding all that, but all of that as a creative that seeks into that creativity. And then it's like, that's how we speak the frustration of what we're experiencing in life. So I'm sorry. I love these conversations, but also at the same time, I've been reworking how I do these conversations as well. So we're in
No,
school, we're learning this, we're learning about ourselves, but then we channel that into the art or whatever profession we find ourselves in. So what did you first think you were going to do in school? So you're finding out yourself, you're in school now, you fell in love with, you got the camcorder, but what did HP Mendoza first envision what he was going to do with his life?
well, because kids are dumb, right? Like we don't know. We're dumb. We're
Yeah.
we're 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 literally learning like how to live.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm given tools, right? I'm given
Yes. Yeah. And your
a
brother was guiding you in a way.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Like I had a I had a TRS 80 from Radio Shack that had like 128K. And I had a Super 8 film camera, right? Which then I graduated to using video from there. I had all these tools, and what did I want to be? A magician, Like it was like
That's
because
this is why I love this. So left field, the first you wanted to be a magician, some David Copperfield.
yeah,
What's
yeah.
the other guy that puts himself in through just punishment? That to me
Oh,
isn't magic though. Sometimes I forgot
oh,
his
you're
name.
talking about David Blaine?
That's the guy.
Yeah, no, that's that. He's more like a Houdini type. So those are like Daredevil stuff, right?
Yeah, okay.
But
Yeah.
still kind of one and the same, you know.
Yeah.
But oh, you hear that? It's Fleet Week here. We got jets flying overhead like nonstop. So I think for me it was between being a magician or a stand-up comic. You know,
Oh,
it was
okay.
I yeah, and
But
even my
so who caught your eye? Who were those inspos that made you think in that direction?
hmm,
You know, I'm always curious
I
about
mean the
that.
obvious one, David Copperfield for sure, right? Like every
Okay.
kid who grew up saying that is
And
like,
he
oh, you
try
would
to make the Statue
really,
of Liberty disappear.
yeah. You know, it's like, whoa, he can do that. He can fly. He can, he's chopping people in half. Like it's stuff that I'm like, man, I want to learn how to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel
but
that.
there was also like a little bit of it that kind of felt like there was like a part of me that also felt like, I'm not. That's not my persona, because like I think a lot of like '80s magicians were all about like, like really like serious and just like they loved themselves, like, and it just I was like, I kind of. I'm kind of leaning more toward the stand-up comics now because I had just seen Eddie Murphy Raw, and I was like, like, and I was like, he looks like he's having so much fun up
Look
there.
cool. The leather pants,
Yeah,
everything. Like, yeah,
man,
I want to be that
man.
guy.
And I would quote it all the time. And then this is an interesting thing. I'll never forget telling my family, I'm like, maybe I can be a stand-up comic. And again, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. Like my family, and I don't even know if this is just Joe's doing, but I do think that like it's just like there was a chain reaction of them just saying like, okay, this is the American kid, just listen to him. Everyone's like, yeah, well, hey, let's you want to try that? Like, sure. And I'll never forget my parents introducing me to Dolphy. And like all of a sudden I'm like, I get to meet that Filipino comedian that I see in all those movies that you guys watch. That's crazy. What? He's gonna be in Daly City? What? Because at this point, by the way, like we'd moved just south of San Francisco, and I remember thinking he was the coolest guy. I thought also like it was really cool to hear him speaking English, Um, but I remember thinking, yeah, man, that's so cool. I don't think comedy is my thing. I mean, I think comedy is my thing, but I was watching the way he like held a room, you know, and I admired it so much, and I realized I don't want that, you know. I don't think I necessarily want to be performing all the time. And then it made me revisit all of my favorite stand-up comedians. And of course, to a dumb kid, it's just like he's just a funny guy that gets up on the microphone. But it's like, no, actually, that's a person who's working all the time, you know? And I was like, I like what I do. And you know what I was doing at the time? I was animating. I was just making flip books. I was drawing, and then I would be going to my little piano and making little things here. And I was just doing things in the privacy of my own space. And when it was ready, I'd say, ta-da! Like that's the way I like to operate. And I was like, and I watched Dolphy work a room. I'm like, that's not me. Like I'm just not like a live performer type of guy, which is ironic because I have a live performance coming up in 8 days. But even still, you know what I'm saying though, right? Like there's so many different ways to be creative, and I realized, okay, not a magician, not a comedian. Boy, who knows? We'll find out one day, you
Yeah.
know? And it's so funny how I never thought to marry all of these things that I like to do into something as obvious as filmmaking. So filmmaking didn't even become like an option to me until high school. It wasn't until I was like 13, 14 years old.
So no comic book aspirations, comic artists, you making the flip books and all that? No,
Yeah,
no Stan Lee injection into you, seeing him narrate our favorite cartoons, and then obviously Jack Kirby, all that stuff.
this again. So this is one of those things where, um, as I'm like dipping my toe in a bunch of different things, there's a part of me
Yeah,
that every single time I'm just like, yeah, I don't know if that's me either. I don't know if that's me either. Because then
yeah,
I'd make all these friends that were drawing, and they were aspiring to be comic book artists. Johnny Dominguez is one of my closest friends, and he was amazing. Rest in peace. And I just think like, oh, I'm not as good as that. I can't do that.
yeah. You know
Like,
what? You're right.
you know what I mean? And it's like, and of course, at the time, I never thought that I could actually like write for comic books. I was like, well, if I can't draw, I shouldn't be able to do any of it, right?
Mm,
And and specifically, and this is a weird thing. I don't even know how this came to be, but I just got it wasn't so much I was into manga, but like I was really into anime. And I I wasn't getting manga. I was getting comic book adaptations of anime, which is different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I still have these issues of Robotech, like the comics, and one of them is Robotech 3D, with 3D glasses. And I think that was the closest I got because I think that was a style I could ape more efficiently. But again, I still felt like I was aping. Like I'm like this is not my
Oh,
thing. Like
that,
I love it, but I'm
yeah.
like I know where the ceiling is for my talent there.
Yeah, dude, that's so crazy. I bring up the comic book thing because you're telling me how you're making the flip books. I was doing the
Yeah.
same thing. I
Oh,
was trying to
really?
ape. Oh yeah, dude, making my own Spider-Man stuff and aping Jim Lee and Will Portacio. And the reason, like comics, to me, as the young artist, the young first thing was I thought I wanted to be a comic book creator because, and I saw it as a foreseeable, as a reality because there was so many. As I started looking at the creators, Filipinos have been killing comic books in the Silver Age, our age group,
Yep.
right? Alfred Alcala, Rudy Nebres, and then you found out it was Portacio, then Gary
Yeah.
Alangualan, just there were so many of us. So I was like, oh, we are killing it as creators.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
more Filipinos I saw in the comic book game than filmmaking. So it seemed more reality with comic books. But then I was
Right.
comparing myself to other artists in my school. I'm like, oh man, I'm not as good, so yeah, and then it
Yeah.
kind of took away from
And
that.
and and I get that. That was me. And that's
Yeah,
me now, if I could be
yeah,
honest. This is outside of everything you asked, is just a kind of a note I want to say is that I will, if I'm ever placed in a room full of Filipino artists, I will always have imposter syndrome because I have this thing in my head where I'm like, I will always be surrounded by excellent Filipinos. And I think if you were to ask me 20 years ago, why, what do you mean by that? I'd say, oh, it's because I suck. Like that's an easy way for me to shit on myself. But like if I were to break it down now in a more nuanced way, I think the art that I create is something you have to experience holistically. You know what I mean?
mm,
I create little 90 minute to like 1 hour and 40 minute experiences that might have the craft that doesn't have necessarily match that of, let's say, like like my favorite comics or my favorite like $80 million films, but the end takeaway is my storytelling, right? Like for example, I love the fact that all these journalists watched Secret Art of Human Flight, and they're like, he may not have written it, but it sure feels like an HP Mendoza film. And I'm like, oh, good, that makes me feel really good because that means that I must have a style that people like, right? Um, Whereas I think a lot of times when I enter like the space of a lot of other Filipino artists, they're just kind of like instantly recognizable as excellent. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
mm,
Like they
mm.
can literally be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, here's I drew this," and like that, like within 1 second, you're like, "Damn, you're good," right? Or let's take my music for example. I do think that the people who like my music like it because they like the journey from song to song, or they like the journey within a song, or they like the journey in an album. Because for the most part, I'm making visual albums or I'm making stories like that sound like radio plays, and
Yeah.
you have to listen to the words. But for the most part, like I sound like a jingle. I sound like an Oscar Mayer jingle. I don't even have like a great voice. Whereas I think when you hear a lot of other Filipinos who get brought into the room because they're singers, like they're excellent. So I have this thing about like for the past 20 years, and I say 20 years because like, there's something very special about what happened 20 years ago. I walked into this landscape with complete imposter syndrome, not because I was Filipino in a white landscape, but because I was a sort of mediocre Filipino in an excellent Filipino landscape. Does that make sense? Like to your point, like like comics have been like the Filipinos have been killing it forever in the comic space, you know. And I knew better than to even get into that, you know.
Interesting. Oh, you hit me with certain vibes within all that. Let's go to the music since you brought up the music part. So, because we talked about getting the camera, we talked about the comic book side of things and the art side of things, which are which carried later on, but how like music then really became a thing. I think you pointed out earlier it was the gaming aspect of it and
Yep.
Zelda. So
Uh,
was that the spark of music and then carried through in this
it,
time period right now?
it was literally the title screen of Legend of Zelda, you know, and just like thinking to myself like what is that bass line and what is that melody? and what is that drum line? Because the drums on the Nintendo Entertainment System just sound like, and then boom, 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 boom. And the next day, after playing that at my friend's house, going to the piano in my first grade classroom, and while nobody was looking, I'm like, dum, 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 and then trying to figure out the melody. And then all of a sudden, all these kids came up, they're like, that's Zelda. And the interesting thing about that was, I think to an outsider, they'd be like, oh, look, that kid's trying to show off that he can play piano. I didn't see it that way. I was like, oh, good. Now I have a bunch of people to talk about Legend of Zelda with. You know what I mean?
I
Like
love that. Yeah.
everything that I do that is about that like probably looks showy or is super storytelly is not an aid of looking like some guru or like some genius. It's an aid of me finding more like-minded people, And like I'm calling you here like a fucking Pied Piper because I want to talk to you about Legend of Zelda because I can't get past a certain level and let me like I want to see your save game. Like do you remember the cartridges where they have batteries in them because that's the first cartridge where you can save a game. Um, that was what I was doing. And I remember this one student, Christine Michelob, she was like, "What else do you know?" And I freaked out. I was like, nothing. I don't know any other music. I don't know any other songs. And I went and told my family, and I was like, Lola, my dad's mom. I was like, Lola has a piano and she teaches piano. Like, I think, can I learn piano? And I'll never forget my mom and dad saying, "Oh no, we learned our lesson. Your brothers, they took piano and they hated it. And we're not going to put you through that. We're not going to waste your time because like you're just going to hate it too." And I was like, but maybe they hate it, like I might like it. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that to you. So what I was doing from that point was just like sneaking time onto pianos whenever I could find them. And it was always Zelda, right? I'm like, how do I perfect Zelda? How do I make this sound like Zelda? And then it ended up becoming like, okay, how do I do like the entrance song from Metroid? And then how do I do the Space Harrier theme song? And they were all games. I was just such a
sick, I remember like MIDI synthesizer type. Man, you just bring back memories. I love it. I love it.
well, then my uncle Florenta, then he had a Casio, tiny little
Yeah.
Casio that he just gave to me. And at that point, like I don't even think he knew what he did because then all I did was play Zelda and Metroid and Mario and those things and just trying to figure out like, little tunes. Um, but what's funny about that was I never thought of myself as a musician. I just thought of myself as someone who was just trying to just like, I just liked certain
The
games. I just
imposter
wanted
syndrome. The ape.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel
yeah.
that.
You know what I mean? It's these were just I didn't see these as tools that I was sharpening. I saw these as unhealthy obsessions. You know what I mean? Like I like
Oh,
my like I said, it's a thing, okay? And rest in peace to my father. Um, but man, like I play this back in my head, making flip books, right? And like him coming home and seeing the paper everywhere. And I'd show him one flip book and he'd say, that's good enough, but now clean this. Look, you wasted all that paper. Or then when I had my first computer
oh,
and he got cartridges for the TRS-80 that we, like set experiences, like very specific experiences, and that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to learn how to program, so I learned BASIC. And then he came home, and I was like, "Look, I programmed it to play a song. I learned it from this magazine called Family Computing, and I taught it. I programmed it to play "You're a Grand Old Flag" because like the Fourth of July was coming up, and it was playing in three voice polyphony, and my father was just like, "Oh, that's nice enough, but okay, stop that now. You might break it," you know. And so what's interesting about that was so much of what my father was doing was he was giving me avenues, but when he would see me like veering off course, he didn't see that as me exploring. He saw it as me breaking it. He saw me as like what I mean.
oh
He saw
yeah.
it as transgressing.
Yeah.
So much of what I was doing felt like guilty pleasures. So much of what I was doing felt like it was a waste of time or I was about to break something, so it felt unhealthy. So I couldn't see these as tools. You know what I mean? Unless I was learning a skill, like he was a bus driver for 25 years. My mother worked in medicine or in, the hospitals. Um, those were real people jobs. Like what was I doing? These are unhealthy obsessions. So yeah, that's that's where the music came from. And if I could be honest, it wasn't until, yeah, I think I was 26 when I joined a band, you know, and
Mm.
I literally was just
No band in high school, no music. You didn't decide to like take superlatives while you were in school years?
I think I skipped forward too far. I'm not going to go to 26 because the truth, I wrote a musical when I was a junior in high school.
Okay.
But like because I was looking for ways to kind of expend this like energy. The
Yes, let's
energy.
talk. So yeah, while we're in there, before we get graduate and go off
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I realized that I had to tell at least a few people that I was gay, you know?
Okay.
And the interesting thing about just choosing a handful of people is that's when you start to that's when you start to recognize what danger is, you know? That's when you start to recognize like who your inner sanctum is going to be. And it makes it so that way that becomes a point of discourse. It's your dialogue every day. Your closest friends are constantly checking in on you, and you're checking in on them too. And it becomes this thing where you all collectively recognize what the oppression is that's around you, right? So it kind of weighs you down, and you have no choice but to start feeling things. And because you trust them and they trust you, you're all feeling together. You're 13, you're 14 years old, you're feeling, but then you also all learn how to code switch. So outside, you're like, nah, what are you talking about? No, I wasn't crying. It's just onions. And I think we all had to find ways to channel that. So some of us did it through dance. Me and Seville did it through like dance crews, drill team, and Black Student Union. Um, and I alone with some other kids apart from Seville. For those of you who don't know, Seville was my best friend who recently passed from COVID a few years ago. That's in the last episode, last ShoPowSho. But the other kids that I grew up with, we channeled all that through theater, you know. And then I recognized that I had another subset of friends that were also near and dear to me, but they were very, very far away from those other crews, right? Like the dance crews and the theater kids, those are expressive people, right? We're learning how to express ourselves. So we're shouting, we're screaming the lyrics to Little Shop of Horrors, you know? And then there was another crew of kids over here, and these were the gamers. And they were a little more quiet, but I really related to them. I identified with them too. And so it was funny how no matter where I went, I was always going to be surrounded by music, games, and performance, whether it was like theater or film. And yeah, what happened there was I started kind of just getting cast in musicals along with my other friends because that's what high school kids do. They do Grease. They do they do Little Shop of Horrors, you know? And little did I know that there was going to be a chance for me to kind of like exercise, not exorcise, but exercise some of these skills that I didn't even know I had. Because I remember at one point, uh, Mary Bishop, if you're watching this, Mary, like I'm praising you again. My drama teacher in high school, she was just like, we need to practice to a certain song from Little Shop of Horrors, but the band isn't ready. I'm like, I, I can learn it. And I had a keyboard at this point. So there I am on my Casio, like I bring it into school and I'm playing it, and of course people are making fun of me because I'm like, that's what you do when you're in high school. Look at him doing stuff. Like, look at him, he's into something, he's stupid, and whatever. So there I am, but again, to me, it's not a tool. To me, it's an unhealthy obsession, right? To me, it's like, well, I'm not a piano player. Like they have a need. Miss Bishop needs something, and I know how to do it. So I'm going to learn how to play Little Shop of Horrors on this until the band is ready. They're the real musicians. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Like I was doing this because hmm, I was doing it because it made me feel useful, but it definitely didn't feel like it was expression. So it would come out in fits and starts. And to Mary Bishop's credit, she must have seen something in me because she wanted to know about these other things that she would hear me playing once in a while. And I'd say, oh, it's just a tune that I have in my head. It's just, oh, these are just some lyrics that, whatever, it's dumb. No, it's nothing. And she really pushed. She pushed my sophomore year. She just pushed and pushed. And so junior year, she gave me a chance. She gave me a chance, and I wrote a whole ass musical, and we cast it, and yeah, I wrote music. It's so funny. I can't believe I even forgot I did that. I keep talking about Colma the Musical being the first musical, but no, that was the one. Um, but you know what it was? Again, I think that was during a time when I still thought of it as an unhealthy obsession. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I like,
Oh yeah.
it was to pass the time, like because of course in my head I'm like, well, no, when I graduate and I'm probably gonna get a job with the city or whatever. Like you think that you're gonna be something else,
Yeah.
just not that. So yeah, the music started there, and yeah, so if I could fast forward to when I was 26, I think I had just moved to the East Coast and I just didn't know what to do. I was
Oh,
like,
hold on. So before we fast forward there, so all right, to get that transition. So high school, college, graduate, because that's a big moment. Before we get there,
yeah.
I don't want to miss that before we get to that.
Mhm.
Um, we're all kind of as Asian kids and Filipino kids, the arts is fun for as a sidebar gig, but that isn't what they want us to do as a career. So
Yeah.
was there a specific, when you're choosing whatever college or whatever you were choosing to go, where did you want to go? Where did they want you to go? And then what ended up happening?
Wi- Again, my family really wanted me to go where I wanted to.
Okay.
But the caveat was you just need to recognize how much we're putting into this. You
Yeah.
know? So for example, I had that TRS 80. It's a computer about this big. And it was my brother, Joe, was just like, don't you think he should graduate to something better? Now he's in high school. And then I got a Tandy 1000, which is like it's a PC, And oh, I don't know. This is not it's I still have it somewhere. And yeah, I learned how to program on that, and I was making games, you know, and I was making side scrollers. I even made a beat 'em up,
Oh,
because I was really into Karate Champ, and
damn.
it was funny because every time my family would walk in the room and they would see me coding, I felt like I was doing something right. But if they walked in and they saw me playing a game on it, I felt like I was doing something bad. Like again, it's just an unhealthy obsession. And so it became this thing because they would just always point out, yeah, that Tandy, that's that's an expensive computer. I hope I like, and the one thing they love saying is like, I hope you're gonna make it worth our money. Like they wanted to let me know how much money they'd spent on me.
Yeah.
So I felt, of course I felt guilt over that. So of course I wanted to make sure that if they ever walked in on me using the computer that I was typing and not using a joystick or a controller pad, because I didn't want to look like I was playing. So it was this thing where like I had this thing where I'm like, I'm gonna end up doing something with computers. That's because they've already spent this much money on me. Imagine thinking that 13 years old, like, well, they spent all this money on me. I better make the decision with my career right now to do something with computers. Like I just because that was just it was impressed upon me that if I don't, it was a waste of their money, right? Um, like side note, fast forward, I love that in 2021 I had to do a live show with some music that I wrote for 18 different people, and I used that Tandy 1000 to make the music as a piece of retro nerdcore, and I got Mega Ran to perform on it. I was talking to Cartoon Violence and Lex the Lexicon artist, and like I made an album out of it, and I was like, look, I finally made use of that computer, fam.
Love that.
Anyway, that was a side note but yeah, it's funny because like I was like, okay, um, I better do something that doesn't cater to these unhealthy obsessions. And I didn't know what that was going to be.
Man, okay. So you chose to go to school where, or and what, you know, so computers and
Well, but by the time I'd realized that um I was never gonna do anything that had more than make I was never gonna make a video game that had more than two levels. Because I don't know. I mean, there was no support for that in my school, you know? And that's not to shit on my school. It just wasn't that kind of school. What my school did have was a theater program. And this is where I'm going to give all the credit. We had a film history, we had a film literature class. And I was like, what is that? I was like, no way, what is that?
yeah.
Um, and I remember taking that. Gary Keller, rest in peace, that teacher changed everything. Between Gary Keller and Mary Bishop, um, suddenly I felt liberated because I didn't have my family around me. And every time I was around either of these two teachers, I felt like I was in my own world. Mary Bishop introduced me to Shakespeare. Mary Bishop introduced me to Moliere. Mary Bishop introduced me to all the playwrights. And then Gary Kellard, man, I remember just going in there and thinking like, well, that's cool. I'm gonna take this class and watch some movies, you know? And then him talking about Citizen Kane, I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be boring, this black and white movie, right? He starts the movie and like within the first 10 minutes, I'm like, I'm under its spell. I was like, what is it? Who is this Orson Welles? What? This is a and he gave us the history of how what why Citizen Kane the story came to be, and then I was hooked there. I would take the stories and feelings that I got from film lit, took them to drama, and started talking to Mary Bishop about like, hey, what's satire? Tell me what is satire? We'd be talking about like different forms of storytelling. And honestly, from that point on, I was like, okay, so maybe not computers. Something definitely that has to do with storytelling. And I remember at that point, it was like around junior year after I'd done my musical, where I was like, okay, so maybe not necessarily a musician, but there's something there. So maybe there's something after film lit. And I purposely started looking up the colleges that taught film as opposed to video, because I was that kid. Like I'm not that anymore. Like I'm all about digital video now. But at the time, you have to understand, 1993, like digital video didn't look good. Or actually, it wasn't even digital yet.
Yeah.
So like if you wanted to make movies, you had to learn on film. So I was looking for the colleges and I found the College of San Mateo. And at this point, I graduated from high school knowing I was going to try film, like literal, like tangible film. And I took a 2-hour bus ride every day to the College of San Mateo just so I could like shoot and edit on film. And that's where I met Richard Wong, who worked with me on Coleman the Musical together. And yeah, I think that was the beginning of the journey, like 1994.
Did the parents know that though?
That's why you were going to that school. Was there
Yeah.
a different, I was gonna follow this degree, but you said, what I'm talking about. Like you had this desire, but I'm letting them know I'm going here for this.
Yeah. Yeah. I did, but I also, it's so funny because at this point, like when I was like 18, no, 17. I was 17 at this point.
Yeah.
I was still adding a year to my age. Remember, like that was me.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
let's
right.
not forget the kind of weirdo kid that I was, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
that kid that feels the need to lie about his age all the time also felt the need to prove to his family that he wasn't a waste of space.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm taking film, but don't worry, I'm also taking computers too. I'm going to make sure that Tandy that you bought me, that $900 computer that you bought me when I was like 11. You know what I mean? Like here I am in college, still feeling guilty about a purchase they made for me when I was 11, right? And I'm like, I just want to make sure that they know that I'm collecting these things, and I was all about like, I think my journey of finding out how to live, right, and how to be authentically me was fraught with the need for me to look like I was grateful all the time.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Like I had to make sure that I looked like I recognized everything they had sacrificed for me. And to me, purchases were sacrifices. Spending money is a sacrifice. And because I know, like one of the things that they loved talking about, like as I was growing up, was like, yeah, you get to go to Catholic school. You get to go to Catholic school. We're paying a high tuition for you to go to Catholic school.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's so funny. Like because a lot of what my family really wanted to impress upon me was they're taking a chance on me. I'm the American. You're going to be a success story. Um, and that puts a price on everything. Everything gets monetized.
Oh yeah.
Everything you do better be commensurate to the effort that they put into raising you. Everything that you do better be the result of all the decisions that they made. So here I am entering college, wanting to learn more about film, but feeling like, oh, but when I was 11, they bought me the computer, and I had that voice playing in my head. It's like, yeah, we spent a lot of money on that, right? Um, and and then still taking computer classes, and still like thinking that I'm going to end up in computers. Interestingly, of course, it helps out, right? Because of
Yeah.
course, the good thing about staying up to speed on computers, not necessarily coding anymore. I'm not coding anymore, right? I'm not trying to make Streets of Rage anymore, right? I'm now just learning more about computers because now I'm just like, I remember that and the first year of film, I was like, "Hi, here I am. I'm shooting on film, just like I did when I was 5 on the same kind of camera. But now I have actors, and now I have like makeup people, and and now we have to go and get this developed. And I'm editing on like with a flatbed, and I'm doing this, and my hands are bleeding, and I hate this. And damn, I just want everything to go digital. Like why can't we just do this with computers? After 1 year of film school, I was just like, why can't we just do this with computers?
Yeah.
So like I think that was the beginning, like 94 was the beginning of like the marriage of like all that stuff that I thought was at odds with each other started to like circle each other. It was like the marriage of computers and storytelling.
Mm. Okay, so when you went to school though, were you staying still at home or were you staying at school?
Oh, I was staying at home. It's
And okay, and the reason, yeah, and I'm sure you probably understand why, is like you're still not you're under the roof. You're still under the whims, and as you said, you're living for them, but you can't be your full self yet. And that's what I'm trying to discover when HP finally found himself. Because we're going to school partially for, like we said, we were doing the film, but you're also doing the computers for them. Little know that it's going to kind of blend later on. But when are
yeah,
we finding ourselves? Because that's where a lot of people, I went off into the military. A lot of people, leave off for school. Tell
right.
me, finding HP into graduation, or then was that the East Coast when you left? Is that where you fully were able to find yourself? Take me to the journey to the East Coast and completing school and all that.
Well, I have a take on all of that, but I'll end with that just so I'll stick to the chronology because there's a good amount of storytelling to why I should tell it in order. Because the point that I'm at right now, like I was saying, is like me realizing I need to marry all that.
Yeah.
I'm like 17, 18 years old at this point. And then I hit 19. It's my second year of college, and the house is different now. My father's out of the picture. My mom's had a really hard time. Imagine being a single mother with 3 kids, 3 boys, you
Yeah.
know? And at this point, one of the boys now has a wife and kid in the house too, you know? And my mom's like keeping the roof over our heads, and we're renting. And we'd moved a lot, because like at that after my mom left my dad, life just got really hard. She worked a lot. She worked a lot. And then we worked a lot too. We all did too. So um, that's a hardship that I know a lot of Americans experience, right? And I know a lot of Filipino Americans experience that because all of my Filipino friends were going through the same thing, right? So I'm not going to even say that this is something bespoke to me. However, what is bespoke to me is that we all had this guilt. We didn't know we had guilt. We
Shared
didn't
trauma.
Yeah, we didn't you don't know what you have because it's normalized, right? It's
Yes.
like you're gonna ask a fish what water is. You know what I mean? Like this is like guilt is just a way of being, right? So here I am in college and finding out there are lots of people who are living without it. I'm like, well, that's crazy. You can just decide to like you want to be something. Like I have to make sure that everything I do is in line with everything that they've done. And I remember a lot of my friends were just like, yeah, but why? And I said, well, okay, let me give you the story. And I would tell them everything. And then I would lead up to the point where I was at that point to make sure that we were contemporaneous, that we were now on the same page. They now witnessed my life story and that my mother was a single parent whose life got even harder. So there was even more sacrifice, you know? Everything, there was no thriving. There was only surviving, right? And like just like being booted from house to house. How dare I even think about like doing something as frivolous as making movies, when I could be giving back to the world by being a nurse, or something that like is a real job. And when 19 hit, I turned 19, and I think I was like my mental health was just waning at that point, like it's between the sort of hardship of just like what we were all going through as a family, just me hiding, me finding it impossible to hide that I was gay, because
Have you
men
not had
had
a relationship or were you boyfriend or anything at this point yet?
I hidden in
Yeah.
high school, and like
So
I
yeah.
said,
Okay.
only to a select, like I said, just like you find
Yeah.
those people, just that handful. I wasn't like out and proud, and I'm
Yeah.
really happy for the new generation of kids in my family who can like wear rainbow flags, like, and they're like 10, but
Yeah.
like that was me. That was this is the 90s with a super Catholic family. So when 19 came around, something very specific happened. I remember thinking, I had these thoughts swimming in my head. I'm like, I need to run away. I need to get away. I need to like leave and like never tell them where I am and just be gay, be who I am, you
Yeah.
know? And and planning that, just thinking like, I don't want to be subject to any violence, maybe not even just violence, but even ridicule or just even a blind eye, Um, didn't want that. So I was planning my escape. And then what happens? Ellen DeGeneres decides to come out of the closet. And by the way, so my two older brothers, like they're tough guys, they're tough guys. Like, they were both in gangs. And we lived sort of a tough life. My family's a bunch of tough people, So here they are sitting around the TV watching Ellen come out of the closet, right? And Hector, my second oldest brother, like the toughest one, I remember him saying like, "Good for her," and I was like, "What?" Right? And he's just kind of then he just goes back to eating his sandwich, and he said I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was just like, "Yeah, man, good for her. It's just like people got to be who they are." And I'm like, "Huh? Hang on a second." And I remember I was like, "Okay, that just set my brain on fire." Couldn't sleep that night, man. 19 years old. It's
Mm.
like I had foreseen this because I was reading about it in the magazines and in the TV guide, and then finally the episode comes in, my family knows about it, and then I told my mom. My mom was sad because she was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna have grandkids." That's very mom. That's very, like everybody's like sad about not having grandkids. But I remember she was like, "Well, you should be careful who you tell." I told Hector right away because I was like, "Look, so I want to ask you, you're cool with Ellen coming out?" He's like, "Yeah, man, totally." And I told him, and he was cool with it. Joe wasn't so cool with it, and that's okay because he is now. These are the journeys we go through. It's a process. Um, but I think at that point, I was like, wow, this is what it feels like to be authentically me, right? I'm out. I'm out. And I remember thinking, this is who I am now. This is who I am. And then I went to work the next day. I was working at the Exploratorium. And then all of a sudden I felt like, oh, I'm not ready to tell everybody. And and then I had to like discern which of my friends was ready for it. And like then for the rest of my life, I realized that's what being out is. Being out isn't about like walking through the door and being like, ta-da, I'm out. It's more like, okay, I'm coming out all the time, because, whenever I meet someone new, they'll be like, oh, yes, you got a girlfriend? Then I have to reveal to them, well, no, because so I will always be coming out, right? And I think for me at that point, I was like, well, if the process of coming out is all about always coming out, will I ever know what it's like to be authentically me? Right? And that's when the more I leaned into my identity, and the more I leaned into being Filipino, and the more I leaned into being gay and finding the gay Filipinos, finding the gay people of color, finding like the QPOCs, and finding those communities and finding all the organizations, that's when everything started to really crash down around me in a good way, where I'm like, cool, now I'm comfortable with who I am. The fuck am I gonna do with my life? Like what do I what am I, right? Because
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like, you know, your uncles could be like, okay, cool, yeah, you're Filipino, you're gay, but what are you? You a doctor? You a janitor? Like to them, it's just like it's profession, right? And at that point, I'm like, I don't know. And I think that's when I went east, like
Okay.
at that point, like I was like, I think I suck at everything else. I've
Did you
put
graduate
so
already?
So you graduated from,
Oh, from college?
yeah.
So oh man, you are Oprah. See, um, yeah, I thought I could get away with that.
No
Yeah,
worries.
it was crazy because I loved college. I loved college because all of a sudden I was like, this is what it feels like to be me. I'm me now. I had a job. I actually had two jobs, and I was going to college, right? I was
Yeah.
because I'm that kid, and I'm like, this is who I am, And then all of a sudden, my mom found out that she had a tumor, and all of us had to band together as a family and just kind of help because again, we hadn't heard from our father,
Yeah.
and here she is, she's about to undergo brain surgery. She had a brain tumor, you know, and we all had to band together. And I dropped out of college, and you know, no one asked me to drop out of college, but
Yeah.
but you have to help, you know.
Exactly. A bigger reason. That's why I think also it's so important just to have it said, in different ways,
Mhm.
because life's journey isn't just straight and narrow. It's a lot of bends and turns,
Yeah,
for very many reasons. And if that's part of your journey, it's part of your journey.
yeah.
You'll still get to that destination.
Or you'll still get to a destination.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Exactly.
yeah, it might not even be the one that you think you set out for. Look, I told you this before we even started recording.
Yeah.
I Everything about this project I'm on right now has been like I'm really good at setting myself for success, and then my hard drive died. And today I'm like, oh, I'm floating around like, oh, like everything is on
Yeah.
still. Welcome to life. That's
Ex-
the like I have to like it's just a
Fucking
reminder.
life, man.
It's a
Yeah.
reminder that it's just like, you know what, these plans of yours, that's cute. So my mom, like she's recovering from all this. I'm at home. We're all helping out. We're all helping out. All of us, even my niece who was a kid at the time, Um and I don't say this begrudgingly. We all did this because we knew that this is what you had to do. This is family. Um, because my thing was I'm young, I have my whole life ahead of me, and then I think what started happening was then the guilt started setting in.
Hmm.
Like it's you don't realize that you don't just learn certain things. Sometimes things are so strong that they carve grooves in your brain. You know what I mean? They carve paths, and those paths inform how your thoughts are formed, right? And so that guilt that I grew up with, whether it be a confluence of Catholicism and Catholic school and like this sort of like, hey, make sure that the computer is worth it. Um, that all led to me at that point saying like, oh shit, I got it. Now what am I gonna do? You know? Now what? Am I just destined to just always be trying to figure out I didn't sharpen any skills. All I know how to do is like tell stories and fucking make flip books and make two levels of a video game, like and like copy video game music and cartoons and I don't know, man. And I felt lost. I just felt so lost. I was a dropout. I was a college dropout with no sharpened skills. All I knew how to do was lean into those unhealthy obsessions. Well, and again, what are the unhealthy obsessions? Storytelling, singing, silly songs, video games, camera work, mixing the computer with the camera work and all this stuff and all that stuff. That was my way of saying, well, at least I still know how to use a computer. At this point, again, I may be a little bit older, but I'm still a dumb kid. I don't realize that like I actually am sharpening my skills. But at that point, I remember I was just like, all right, I'm going east. My brother already went east. Joe went east. I'm going to go there too. I'm going to find myself, you know?
Okay.
And I joined a band, you know? I joined a band because I was like, this is the closest I've felt to the joy of playing Legend of Zelda. I was like, and I literally, it was like an electro band. So I was just like hitting a bunch like this, like the same chord over and over again. Then shit, like from a C to a
Yeah.
G to a C to a G. And it was fine. It was fine. Like I made a lot of good friends. It felt really good to go to the East Coast and kind of find myself. And I remember then at that point, um, just making parody music, you know, because I was kind of going back to that thing that my family was really good at, which is like not allowing myself to feel about making fun of everything, right?
Mm.
So what I did was this. I made a song that was making fun of something. And I thought, but I'm really going to put a lot of work into it. So that way, if people do think it's a good song, I'll say, thank you. I put a lot of work into it. And if they think the song sucks, I'll say, yeah, well, whatever. It's just a joke, you know?
Yeah.
And my thought was, if I pretend that I'm a good musician, then maybe people might think it's good music, you know? And dude, that it ended up being a bunch of songs that I didn't take seriously, but I did take seriously. And I made a whole album. It was the first time I went solo from this band and I called it Everything is Pop. Like everything about it was so ironic, and that was so long ago. And next month it's celebrating its 20th anniversary. um, and I think at that point when I was just like, well, people seem to really like my music. Okay, maybe I am a musician. Too bad I'm kind of failing at the whole film thing. You know, like everything I did, every time I felt like I was going like I was taking steps towards something, I would shit on myself for not making it somewhere else.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, and really what it was doing was I was kind of I didn't know this now, but it's clear to me now that I was just looking for reasons to go back to the comfortable zone of just being angry at myself for just feeling like not enough. And if I ever started to excel at anything, it was like, well, it couldn't possibly be something good. You know, it's because you're doing something wrong over here. You know, yeah, you're getting good at the music. That's because you're failing at film, right? So when I then decided to do another parody song for my best friend who I left in the Bay Area, um, he was still living in Colma, and and he was doing a lot of musical theater. So I was like, dude, wouldn't it be funny? Wouldn't that be so fucking funny if there was something called Colma the musical? Like I was like, that's just a little in joke, you know?
Yeah.
And I wrote one song, and I played it for my brother, for Joe, the influencer. And he's like, that's funny, man. That's really good. And you're good at that. And then I wrote two songs. And I said, this is what I'm going to give as a birthday gift. And my brother was like, yeah, it's kind of weird. You know, it's just two songs. Like, I feel like you got to like either just give him the one song. And he goes, or write a bunch. And I thought that was an interesting thing for him to say, because his whole thing was like, you either do one or you do a bunch. And in his way, what he was saying was like, quality or quantity. Choose one, right? And so I wrote a whole ass musical called Colma the Musical, and it started circulating around like the underground theater scene because he was in musical theater, and it got back to Richard Wong, who I went to college with, learning on actual film. And he was like, he contacted me on Friendster. He's like, dude, where have you been? I've been looking for you. I'm like, yeah, we just kind of fell out of touch. Sorry. Like I'm on the East Coast now. He's like, dude, what is this Colma the Musical? I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's just a joke. And he was like, yeah, I think this should be a movie. Like, would you come back to California? We should make this into a film. And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, you know, everyone says that. At that point, like I felt like every time I met someone who said that they were a filmmaker, they just liked saying they were filmmakers and they were one day gonna make something, you know. They came up with a name for their production company before they ever made anything. They made logos for the companies, you know, and I was just like, whatever, like this everyone says that. But Rich felt different though, because at least at the time, Rich was working on Arrested Development, you know. So it's like, okay, no, he's actually working, you know.
Arrested
and here
Development.
Arrested Development, like name.
yeah, you know, and I'll never forget when he brought me on set. So I was just like, shush, you made it, and he was like, no, I mean, you know, I'm not making my movies though.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was interesting because then at that point, I was like, I have no choice now because here's Richard Wong, really good friend, one of my oldest friends. And he's putting all this money into me, you know? And then that kind of like, it's similar to the Tandy 1000 again. It's like, I got to make sure this is worth it. But this time, I think it was for good because I'm like, it's not about money now. It's more like people are putting effort into me. Am I really going to keep shitting on myself? Am I really going to keep on saying like, it's just a joke? Like, what good does that do anybody? You know? So at that point, like I remember, like as we would started casting and like we would started finding people to be in the crew and people who would like be serious about helping us make the movie. Um, People would be like, "Oh yeah, so you wrote a musical." Like I think my initial reaction would be like, "Oh well, you know, I'm just, you know, I just fuck around, you know, I'm just a guy, you know." And at that point, I was like, "No, I owe it to everyone to be like, yes, I wrote a musical and we're making a movie." And yeah, that was the start. I mean, one could argue that Everything is Pop, that little kind of fake album, which is not a fake album, was the start. But like the reason I say that Call Me the Musical was the start for me is because that's the time that I decided to kind of stop being so aw shucks about myself. You know, I mean, I will always be an aw shucks kind of guy, you know, but at that point, I also recognized that being aw shucks all the time was bad business because here we're this is work. We're trying to make a movie, you know.
Was there a light bulb or something
Something that happened at that exact moment? that drove that point home to you to finally like, yes, I'm fucking HP Mendoza, man?
I think I think we were all going through it. We all had a collective light bulb going over it. We were all the same age, we were all going through it. We went to the same school, we were all going through it where, Rich and I, and look, Rich is doing great, man. He's like we still do lunch every week. He lives in San Francisco, and 20 years after the fact, we're still really good friends. He just did a movie for Hulu. He just did The Valet, and I just did my movie. We're still doing our thing, but like it was a long process. Imagine this is our first time doing the thing. This is our first time saying that we're independent filmmakers. We were embarrassed to say we were filmmakers because we didn't think we deserved to. We didn't think we you know what I mean? Even though we literally made a film, and the thing is, we would say these things to each other. We would bolster the imposter syndrome in each other, right? Where we'd say like, why would we even say that we're filmmakers, man? It's not even shot on film. We're shooting it in digital video. So why would we even say we're filmmakers? And then he would say like, yeah, right, totally. And then I would hear him agree with me, and it would make me mad at him. I'd be like, wait, don't agree with me. You're a filmmaker, And it was this thing where I'm just like, why are we doing this? Why are we saying this? And I think this is a very formative thing. When we did the Asian American film circuit with Colma the Musical, and just seeing the response that it got, and then getting invited to things that we never even thought we would be invited. Like I'm talking to Michael Krasny on NPR. That's crazy, And then I'm there with other Asian filmmakers, and the more I got to befriend them and talk to them about their experience, I'm thinking to myself that I was alone this whole time, but they have almost the same exact experience. I met Jennifer Pang on the circuit, and she has very, very similar stories. Especially a lot of the Filipino American filmmakers. Man, I got really close to. Do you know Patrick Apino?
Yeah. I'm familiar with the name. Yeah.
Yeah, he played Troy in Bittermelon, but he's also,
yes.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you leading into all from there to there. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he's so much like me. It's crazy, right? Like it's so funny when you meet people and you realize you were never alone,
Right.
And yeah, I think it was
like me knowing you right now, like you and like my friend Patricio Janelsa with Lumpia. Like we would have been like squad back in the day. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
I'm actually shocked that Patricio and I like ran into each other so late, Like we know all the same people. We just like it took us forever to meet,
Yeah.
But okay, real talk though, a lot of that's my imposter syndrome, because there were multiple times I've seen him in the room. I'm like, no, I couldn't go up to that guy. That's the Lumpia guy.
Yeah.
It's a thing, especially in the Filipino scene. It's just like, oh, that's like, oh yeah, that's and Patricio always has like a big entourage too, right? So it's like it's kind of intimidating to break into that. So there have been multiple times that we've been in the same space at the same table, and I was way too shy, So yeah, maybe we wouldn't have squatted. I don't know. But yeah, that was like 2006. That was a crazy time. It was sort of the start of it all.
With Colma the Musical. And then because 07 was Bitter Melon, right? Or 08?
No. Because 2006 was Colma, and then I did Fruit Fly after that in 2009.
Okay, yeah, Fruit Fly.
And then was I Am a Ghost after that.
Okay.
Then Bitter Melon in 2018. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was like the culmination of it all. I was like, I'm going to tell a Filipino story,
Yeah. Bitter Melon is, I think, my introduction to you. And then I started doing research after that. And I was like, oh, wow, this guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Coma took you from East Coast back to the West Coast, and then the eventual working now in film. But also, I'm assuming your brothers moved over here. Your mom was still in San Francisco, right?
Yeah. I mean, Joe just became an East Coaster,
Yeah.
And that's all I ever wanted to be, Like
Yeah.
it was one of those weird things, like, without getting too far into it, it was a thing where, we had a really kind of troubled like upbringing, and it led to like people running away a lot. And one time my mom and I ran away from the house together,
Mhm.
But like I remember there would be times when, like, specifically when Joe would run away, like that was my tether, man. I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
gotta go wherever he's going, you know?
Yeah.
So it became a thing. Like when he became an East Coaster, I'm like, yeah, man, me too. Like it's funny because I will always think of Joe as someone who just has like all these plans in his head, and everything he does, he meant to do. Kind of like the computers, kind of like Akira, kind of like with the foreign films and the film festivals. I had no idea he was just like reading up about it the night before, you know? So in my head, he's just the guy that he's got the plans, and I'm just
Yeah.
copying him.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be an East Coaster too. Still do. If I could be completely honest with you, I do feel more at home on the East Coast in general with like East Coast vibes more than I do with
Wow.
like West Coast vibes,
And that's
you know?
surreal to me because of just, well, I'm in the DC area. I would say it's different when I'm like Charleston area is where a lot of the Filipino community raised me up. And
Mhm.
then outside of that, going to the West Coast where my family are in San Diego and all that. But here in DC, I'm somewhat connected, but I also feel there's levels to the Filipino community here. But there's also like this very Mrs. Jones type community here in the DC area, like wanting up each
Sure.
other. And it's not such community as it was in Charleston that I think was reminiscent of the West Coast kind of Filipino community that I had.
That's
Um,
interesting because
yeah,
it's so what's funny about what you're saying is yeah, I know what you're talking about. I agree with you. At the same
yeah,
time, I feel like that leads to something else that ends up being community anyway.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
like I think one thing that and you know this might be an outsider perspective, and I totally own that. I could be completely wrong. You know, like my time on the East Coast was always a little rosy because I'm kind of walking into this like, oh, look at my new life. You know, oh, this is my, you know,
Well,
like,
oh yeah.
you know,
Well, that's also yeah. Going back to your story too. Well, I'm sorry. One of the things I wanted to pull from that also, if I'm sorry to throw you back in there, but you being gay and relationship
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I think at the time of the story chronologically of your story when your brother accepted it and then but then you moved to the East Coast, were you able to indulge in that? I guess is what I was hoping for, and for you to find love and you were pursuing the music and just that now. Did that happen here?
So I
Is that
mean,
also why it's so rosy too? Because you
yeah, I
found
mean,
love?
it's you know what's funny is any hardships I had like after coming out, any hardships I had, and I want to be careful about how I say this because I don't want to diminish experiences. But any hardships that I experienced after I came out were the hardships that any gay person would have experienced, right? And I will say, as far as love life goes, um, my romantic escapades were no different from like that of like any of my heterosexual friends, you know? Um, like, you know, you date, you fuck around, you could do one night stands, you think you found the one and then you didn't, right? Like, you know, these are things that feel hard in the moment, but like after like all that's said and done, it's just like, oh, but that's all my straight friends went through similar things. You know,
Yeah.
I had like lots of straight friends who also thought they found the one, then got cheated on or whatever, or got stolen from. You know, that has nothing to do with me being gay. It just has to do with like the act of finding love, right? So in that respect, yeah, I indulged. You know, it became so normal to me and my family and everyone around me. I became so good at finding out exactly how to craft who my circle was going to be that they would accept me for exactly who I am um that that I avoided hardship, right? And I don't think that's not running from problems. That's just like finding again, like finding out who are the people who are at your side and holding them even more dear to you. The funny thing about that though was that, you know, this whole thing about me going to the East Coast, um, when I first got to the East Coast, I was like, what am I gonna do? And even joining that band and like making that little album, um, I think making music became a thing that I would just kind of do like in the privacy of my own space, kind of like I was telling you about like this like being at home and like making the flip books. If I was ever going through anything, I would turn it into a song, you know, and I was like I wouldn't know what to do with that song. And if I ever felt something like strongly that felt like these are some feels, I would keep that in a very specific folder that I called Nomad, you know? And that was like it was kind of like a diary of sorts, like a journal, you know, if ever I was going through anything that was like heavy, I would kind of make a joke out of it, make a song, and then perform it, and then say, okay, so now that I know how to make a joke song about it, how do I perform this without the humor, you
Mm,
know?
yeah.
And each of those songs in Nomad is very much like written from a place of irony and then performed with none, right? And so it ends up being this like super heartfelt story of like whatever I was going through while I was a nomad, where I was like going from like, from Baltimore to Philly to New Jersey to New York and then back to Philly again, then to San Francisco and all this. And I was just writing a song per incident, per feel. And what's interesting about that is that became my second album. And it got called Nomad. And I just want to fast forward to something very specific because I think this is really interesting. A few weeks ago, I'm never going to shed the imposter syndrome. It's just always going to be a part of me, right? You just learn, you don't shed things, you just learn how to deal with them, right? So a few weeks ago, found myself like right here, right in this seat, and I was working on Secret Art of Human Flight. I was working on like the theatrical release or something to do with the film. And I just found, I guess I just woke up on the dark side of the bed, man. Like I was just like really unkind to myself, I was being really unkind to myself. I was like calling myself a failure. I was calling myself like, just like all these things, right? All the feels that were carved into my brain and created pathways were in full force and they were just like flaring. And I was like, you know what? This isn't real. This isn't real. I need to go out for a walk and just like get the blood flowing, go get the muscles moving. And it just break from this screen, break from the Zoom calls, break from the emails, and like get myself out of this funk. And I went for a walk and I said, I'm going to listen to Nomad. And I put that album that I was just telling you about, like, which is, it's taken on a life of its own now, like almost 20 years later, where it's just an album that I made, right? And I forgot what it actually was until I went for this walk around Dolores Park. And the songs brought back all these memories of where I was, whatever I was going through at that time in 2004, between 2002 and 2004. And I remember like listening to this one track, I was like, oh man, this is when I wrote this when I was going through some major imposter syndrome. I remember I wrote this when I was calling myself a failure for being an admin at like this like little tech company and just feeling like, oh, I'm never going to amount to anything. Man, what am I doing? Like I'm listening to that much younger version of myself saying the exact same things I was saying while I was sitting in this seat. And it dawned on me while I climbed to the top of the hill of the park and I was just kind of looking at all of San Francisco while listening to this really old album of mine. And I was like, huh. And this much time, like multiple decades later, after all this time spent trying to fit in and trying to be the person that I thought people needed me to be, no matter how much I tried, how much effort I went into it, this song is proving to me that I was always only ever going to be who the fuck I am right now. Like that's what's authentic. Does that make any sense?
Oh,
It gets
yeah,
really
dude.
fun. It's funny. It's like maybe the whole warts and all thing also is about embracing the depression, the bouts of depression, the imposter syndrome, the toxic moments, the times I'm unkind to myself. And you know what? Sometimes it results in a song called Brilliance is Everywhere on an album called Nomad. You know what I mean? And maybe now that I'm going through this, maybe that's what manifested Secret Art of Human Flight. Maybe that's what's manifesting the next thing, I know I just fast forwarded to the present day, but there's a direct tie-in right there. I just wanted
Oh
to, I
no,
wanted to,
all good.
yeah.
No, that works, HP. I think these roller coaster rides of life are just when you think back and you think where you're at now, like you just said, this is who the fuck I am, and I should be happy who the fuck this is, and fuck everybody else. Excuse my language, and I apologize, but like
That's my
you
fault.
just
I
gotta
started
not
it.
give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
care so much for others, vibes when we shouldn't to do a degree, and like you're saying, in this whole journey we've been taking of your life and living for our family, which is we live for our family, we love our family, but also through that we have to be us and find ourselves in order to exist, to be able to help and support everyone as well. Or if not, it's so self-destructive and just, yeah, man. And I just thank you for just sharing everything so far, that
No,
we've
of course,
discussed.
man. I've
Yeah.
been rambling. Like I'm sorry. I'm just like,
No, but I love it, and I can't wait for you to hear this playback, and that's what I hope, and what I've heard from other people when I've done this and we talk this. It's therapeutic, but it also is like, yeah, I'm fucking HP Mendoza. I'm fucking this. Yeah, like this is it. And this is special. And this is what makes me me. And why you're so amazing and so dope, dude. Um,
I appreciate it, man. And you know what? You know what this new version of me is also doing right now is taking that compliment. And like
let's go.
my reaction, my biological reaction to what you just said is to like just like immediately find a way to just shit on myself. I'm just not gonna do that this time.
There we go. Let me, you know what? Let's turn that into those times when we were going through this, because we're going on 2 hours, and my apologies, we go so long, but I knew you and I would have a convo because I think we're just that, I think kind of that spirit. Let's turn it into, what would we have liked to have heard? What would you tell that person out there right now that is going through the same thing, that's listening to this, hearing your story, relating? What did you learn that it took you time to learn that you would have liked to have given and have them, take something from it, from your experience?
That's what would I have liked to have heard?
Yeah.
Like from anybody or like
anybody,
from
anyone.
I think what I think what I would like to have heard is you're okay and you're not in trouble.
And what would you, I love that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stop on it that quickly.
Yeah.
But right now, you were just saying the biggest thing I think what I'm hearing still is the self-imposter syndrome that we all have. But so what do we as people that feel we're imposters? I grew out of, throwing it back real quick to just kind of to help you think about that a little bit. Comics. I wanted to be a comic superstar. I wanted to be the next Todd McFarlane. I wanted to be Will Sportacio. I wanted to be like all these Filipino greats that I saw, like they're killing it. But then I get How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, John Buscema, legend, Wizard Magazine, Bart Sears, Brutes and Babes, telling me how to draw. But I could never find my voice. I could never be Jim Lee or Todd McFarlane. I still couldn't find my style. And I just saw that everybody else was so much better than me, even though they weren't doing these flip books like you and I were doing. I was making comics at that time in my notepad and all that. But then I sucked at like still life, or there's certain things, when school fucked me up because it had to be so, there was no art in it. There was no creativity in it. It was so, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Art is a form of expression, but I wasn't finding that in the rigid confines of what art class was.
Yep.
And so with that being said, if that gave you some time, what would you have liked, or what would you, to tell you that you're not an imposter? What do you need to hear? And I know that's difficult.
Yeah, you know why it's difficult is because it's difficult for me because as much as I try to like, kind of keep it at bay, the truth is I am imposter syndrome. It's in my DNA. That's one of the neural pathways that's been carved in my brain. It's what makes me me, right? And it makes it so much a part of me. And maybe this is evident, like how much I love myself now versus back then, right? But like it's become such a part of me that I kind of only gravitate toward other artists that have imposter syndrome. You know what I mean? I only gravitate toward other creatives who have imposter syndrome, not just because I want to be around other people who, are on my level, but it's kind of the same reason that I went to the piano to play Legend of Zelda. It's not because I'm showing off about it. I just want someone to talk to, Like I want someone who's like-minded who I can talk about this with, because yeah, I know that imposter syndrome is a thing, but so be it. Again, like you said earlier, this is what life is all about. You know what? I could read all the self-help books in the world, but if I read all the self-help books with the goal of becoming this perfect person, let's say I finish all those books, do I then find myself in the company of people who are perfect, or do I find myself in the company of a bunch of imperfect people who also read all the same books? I'd rather be with those people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel that. Let me take that into What do you think is the biggest lesson you've learned that has really helped you to be where you're at now?
Um, Man, it's like so many different ones, right? But I guess right? Because I have a feeling I'm afraid to see this episode because I have a feeling like one, I meander. Two, I think like every big event I've talked about, I'm like, this was the start of it all. This was the start of it all. This was the start of it all. But I think if I were to think about like what overarching thing I've learned is this is so simple, dude. And I will expand after I say this very simple two-word phrase. Let go.
Mm,
I know that people say that, and I feel like I've been told that my whole life.
that's real,
But
dude.
but the thing is, that's the thing about platitudes. They're just words until you actually put them into practice.
Mm,
And letting go isn't just about fuck it. It's more holistic than that, right? I think letting go is also saying, hey, it's kind of like what I said earlier. Letting go might manifest in how you find your family. uh it manifests in the way you pursue happiness, right? Like, what is happiness? Are you seeking happiness? Do you believe in the pursuit of it? I think it's a fallacy. I don't think you should pursue it. I think you actually have to find out what makes you happy right now and cherish it and make it your happiness, right?
mm,
Like, I feel that that's what I was saying about community. I'm not gonna be like, I'm not a user. I don't like go through people. I don't. I fucking collect them and then I find out who stays closest to me, and I'm like, you're my community, right? And so a lot of that is letting go of this idea that I have to find something. A lot of this is letting go of the idea that I have to pursue something. Maybe what I've been looking for has been with me the whole time. It's all it's part of the whole like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm such a failure. Oh well, I'm just gonna go. I guess I'll just like make some flip books and play some video games and play my piano and write a play. You know, like these are all things that I did that I thought were unhealthy obsessions. And because I thought I was going to be some mathematician or some politician or a lawyer or something, you know. And I think when I let go of that, and I said, well, but what is it that I do? You know, because that's the question that you get asked as an adult when you first realize that someone starts referring to you as a man. You know, hey, well, ask that man over there what he does. I'm like, well, that person referred to me as a man. What do I do? I don't know. You know, I'm going to school. You know, but I knew what I did. I played games. I wrote stories. I wrote music. I told stories. I acted. I did all these things. I was a storyteller. So how about I just let go of the idea that I have to be something that I'm not and just take whatever the fuck I am and just start doing that. So yeah, let go. Let go.
yes. Whew. Love that. Love that. All right. Storyteller, my pal, HP Mendoza. I don't want to go too much on because we're almost on 2 hours. And
Yeah.
I definitely want to we're gonna be talking more. You've got other projects on the way. So let's talk that. Let's close this out with you have this amazing film, The Secret Art of Human Flight, um, Bitter Melon, Fruit Fly, Coma the Musical, celebrating, the 20 years of the album. Um, what are stories that you want to tell that uh you are hoping to tell in the near future that people can look forward to?
Um, well, if there's one thing I learned from what the San Francisco Library and the museums have been teaching me about myself since they decided that October is HP Mendoza month for some reason, like they're doing all this stuff. I'm doing a live show on the 19th where I get to talk about my career and and sing all these songs. And as I look at everything I've done, that they're screening like literally like this month, like as we speak, I'm realizing that after each one of those, I thought I was going to do something else, and it ended up becoming the next one, right? Like after Colma, I thought I was going to do the sequel. It was going to be called Ceremony the Musical, and then that ended up being Fruit Fly. I said, okay, well, after Fruit Fly, I just did a gay musical. I'm going to do one that has to do with the politics around being gay. Nope, ended up being a horror movie. I'll do another horror movie after that. Nope, ended up being Bitter Melon. So I do have plans. There are things I want to do, and I'm writing them all right now. I'm like, I'm I can't say too much, but
Yeah, yeah.
I love that I'm working with people who just want to work with me, right? And like these are people again, like Secret Art of Human Flight was the first time I got to actually work with Hollywood actors, and I love that they want to work with me again. And I'm working with people like like with crew people and production companies of movies that I never thought I'd even associate myself with. And here they are just saying like, hey, they're texting like, hey, let us know when you want to make another movie. And I'm thinking, yeah, then good. That must be the next one. But I know for a fact that whenever I plan to make a next movie, it's always something else. So like, I'd love to tell you exactly what it is,
Yeah.
but like your point, like the plans, you know, because the truth is the film industry, especially the independent film industry right now, the scene, the landscape is kind of bleak, right?
Yeah.
So I'm counting my blessings that I actually have like this new family that I've acquired that I'm folding into my old film family now. Now we're all getting together, and I love like I love just seeing them all meet each other, and like I'm like, oh my God, this is the community that I'm forming. We're
Yeah.
gonna make something. I just don't know what it is just yet.
No worries. I cannot wait. I would love to be a part of it as well. Just all of that, but I will definitely be giving you flowers as it happens. I'm so thankful for knowing you, seeing this journey, and just I'm cheering you on this journey. And just man, HP, you are not an imposter. You are amazing, and I appreciate you. And thank you for just sharing your story with me, my brother.
Thank you for having me on, man. Man, I take, wait a minute. Yeah, see, that's why I say you're the Oprah, because I had it in my head that, oh, this is cool. You know, me and Patrick, we're gonna get on this. We're gonna get on. We're gonna talk to each other about like, life. And I'm like, man, I did all the talking.
That's part of my job is the setup, you know.
I know. And that's like the Oprah superpower. But no, next time, collab. Something new.
I cannot wait. And again, you are an amazing talent, and what you're about is just it's just good. You know what I'm saying? And it's that reality and that life that needs to be out there. And there's few people, as we know in this industry. Well, I because I cover a lot, that there's substance to you, and that's what I love about you. And it's impactful substance, and it's meaningful substance. And so I love that. I love
I
that.
appreciate that you just said what you just said because, man, if there is one thing that I do get harsh about to people, like I said, I do collect people, and I'm like, who loves me? I will love them back, keep them here. But there have been people that I've pushed the fuck away. I will say that. And you know what I've had to say to these people is, just be good. Why can't you be good? Just be good. If you can't be good, get away from me. And it's become a thing where it's just like every decision I make, whether it's career wise or just even in grocery shopping, like I always ask it with the lens of, am I being kind? Am I being good? You know? And I just want to make sure, sure, I think like maybe the most arrogant version of myself that lives in here somewhere wants to be referred to as a genius or wants to be referred to as an intellectual or wants to be referred to as someone who's just like a really good filmmaker or a good musician. But that's probably never going to happen because the truth is, all I care about is being good. That's all I care about because
Love
that's
that.
really all the fuck that matters.
Yeah, and it's the toxic people that are out there just I don't need that time. I know
No,
I'm already my worst enemy. I don't need you to tell me I'm bad. Like we said, the imposter syndrome. I already know I fucking suck. But you know what?
yeah,
I'm trying, motherfucker, and I'm
yeah,
trying, and I will outwork you to the end of time. That I will be the worst motherfucker in the world. But at least I'm fucking trying, and I know I'm outworking your ass to do that. So you know what I'm saying?
dude,
Like, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I'm going to share a very personal thing with you for this. It's a very like I recently have found myself in the company of somebody who is really good at putting me down, and he's a little I don't know. There's something is off with this guy where he'll actually like just kind of scream things at me, and just like
Yeah.
he says these really awful things to me. He's not a friend. He's just a person like that's around,
Yeah.
and as terrifying and as terrorizing as that is, if I were to look for a silver lining in that cloud, and I've told a friend this today, she asked me, she's like, how can you have a person like that around you? And I was like, honestly, if I were to find a silver lining to that cloud, the truth is, it's interesting to have those things, this other artist say these toxic things to me, because those are the things I say to myself in my head. And it's interesting to hear them manifest in real life for like in an auditory fashion for my actual ears to hear. And I think to myself, boy, that sounds awful. Well, I should stop saying that to myself then.
Mm.
So in a way, this toxic person I'm talking about is a little bit of a gift. Not everybody gets a toxic person like that. It's a little bit of a trial by fire, but like it's interesting, like when you find these people who say toxic, negative, when they neg you and they say these negative things to you, you can sit there and bristle, or you can say like, oh, that's even further proof that I shouldn't talk to myself that way.
All right, one last question is what I close out with. HP.
Okay, yeah.
I love you, my brother. I love you.
I love you too, man.
I always end it off, if you were to give a nerd, because it's Nerds Rule the World, and a TED style talk, if you're going to a TED style talk on something you're nerdy about, what would it be? And for you, it can't be what we already know about you. We know about the music, the gaming. So I'm crossing off the main players, film, all that. It has to be something obscure that you really know a lot about, that not too many people do know, that you could get nerdy as fuck on that, whatever that is. What is something that people don't know? We're going to tell it to the world on the ShoPowSho right now.
Oh man, there's a lot of those too. These are the things that I hide. Like I know a lot.
I want you to pull one that you're okay to pull out the closet, because we're coming out the closet now. HP, as we said, fuck all that.
By the way, a lot of this stuff, for the record, a lot of this stuff is stuff that I hide, but not because it's like salacious or like dirty. It's just some of it's really boring. Like I know a lot about stone fruit. I can tell you about the difference between an aprium, a pluot, a plumcot, and and just a plum and a peach. Like
that's
I know
perfect. No, this is the stuff I love, because this is Nerds. That's nerdy shit. That's nerdy as fuck.
Man.
And like,
dude,
it's cool to know that stuff. I had another friend that was like, I'm a lawyer, or president, like just off that's what I'm looking for. Not the direct stuff. Like I want to grab it. Right. So fruit cat.
Specifically stone fruit, like peaches, cherries, plums, pluots, apricots, apriums, plumcots, dapple dandies. Like I know all the variants. Like
what made that get you in? How did that become such a thing for you?
Honestly, okay, no offense, dude. Like I said, I have found myself as a sort of like an East Coaster. I love the East Coast, but I didn't realize what I took for granted in California. East Coast stone fruit is not as good as West Coast stone fruit. When I first moved to New York, and I was like, whoa, there's like plums on every corner. There's like a plum cart. What's a plum cart? Like we don't have plum carts in San Francisco. Man, fuck San Francisco. Excuse me, sir. I'm gonna take one of these plums. Bought a plum and I bit into it. I was like, what the fuck is this? I was like, this is not.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So the best stone fruit is the West Coast for you. For HP?
For me.
It's gotta come from the. This is nerdy shit. I love it. Isn't that dope? That's cool, man? That's cool.
I'm glad you think so, man. Because like I will bore the pants off of somebody with like my talk of stone fruit. I will talk about how they're grafted. I'll talk about like the variant. Yes, yep. That's it. That's it. And because of this, I'm gonna post a video dedicated to you about how this is the last week of stone fruit right now.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'll tag you in that. I'll tag NRW too.
Hey, my brother, all the love to you, my man. And thank you for coming back on. Thank you for sharing your story. I know there's so much more we could have gone, but we would have gone for hours on hours. But I'm grateful for the time that we've had. And I can't wait to have, again, a conversation with you. And I want to celebrate and give you your flowers and talk about that next project. Man, until the project we're working on together at some point, I want to manifest that into the universe.
That's what we're working toward. We're obviously working toward that.
Let's go. And if you're coming here to the East Coast soon, man, we got to get up. All the love, my brother.
In like a couple weeks. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be in touch. We got it on socials. Everybody, HP Mendoza, go check out The Secret Art of Human Flight out right now, as well as all the other projects. That library, man, they're celebrating them all month over there in Cali, which I would be out there too to just show the love to this cat because he's brilliant. He's amazing. He's dope. I love you, my man. Everybody, HP Mendoza. I'm Kuya P. This is ShoPowSho. As we sign off, mahal kita. Salamat. All right, brother. There you go. There's a cut. ahead and record. Let me bring it in, and we'll have some fun, dude. Because I want to know the HP Mendoza. Because I think all this will filter in with all of that, right?
I think so.
East Coast, West Coast. Bro, we could talk for hours. So let's put it onto the wax. We'll make it easier there.
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. In a 1, 2, 3.